I feel we created a problem that now we don't know how to solve. So in the process of separating this coffee that tasted better or that was that deserved to be paid better, right? Because we tied flavor to price. If you think about it, it sounds like a good thing. Okay, we are people saying that we are going to reward producers if they produce coffee that tastes better. Who made the decision on what was better? Who made the decision of what was high quality?
Map It Forward Business Mastermind groups are back for 2024. And if past mastermind groups are anything to go by, you absolutely want to be a part of this if you're a business owner ready for change. Spots are limited to 10 people per group. And if you own a business in the coffee sector and are looking for support in a nurturing and focused group coaching environment, this could be the thing that helps you through these challenging times in coffee and jumpstarts your planning for 2025. There are 3 mastermind groups, each with a different business focus. I will be your coach, and the first one will be focused on strategic business planning, the second one on business growth, and the third on increasing your sales in coffee, both B2B and B2C. Groups start the week commencing October 7, and prices start at $189 per month for 3 months. You get a discount if you pay all 3 months in advance. Previous participants found these groups life-changing for their business, and all groups come with a 100% money-back guarantee. If you're interested in finding out more or registering, head to mapitforward.coffee/group coaching or check the links in the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a brand new series on the podcast with first-time guest Camila Khalife from Concaride Cafe. I messed it up.
Cafe.
Girlsplaining Coffee. That's it. It's Girlsplaining Coffee. Very famous Instagram accounts in the coffee industry. Everybody knows who you are. Everybody's excited seeing your name come up on the podcast list. Thank you for being here. I'm very fucking excited about this conversation. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I am equally excited.
Excellent. It's really a pleasure to be able to have this conversation because I see you standing up for a whole bunch of stuff and having a lot of things to say on Instagram about the coffee industry in general. And for us to be able to sit here and have a long format conversation and dissect some of those ideas and get an understanding behind like what's the thinking that leads you to have these opinions is a real treat. Because you get these little things on Instagram and you're like, I wonder where she got the idea for that from. And I wonder what inspired that. I think it's creative and artistic and all that kind of stuff. And as an artist myself in music, like I there's a whole process that goes to like the creation of a song that you never know what the artist is doing behind that. And so this is a real treat for me to be able to get the opportunity to have this conversation with you. So thank you. Now, before we deep dive into what the theme of this series is, tell everybody what you do.
Oh, okay. So first, when we were talking about my Instagram handle, it's con cara de café. Those are words in Spanish that mean with coffee face. Okay,
with coffee face.
With coffee face or with the face of coffee or
okay.
Yes, okay? And that goes back to when I was a kid. I don't know if this happens in other cultures or languages, but we usually like call kids like names that rhyme with their name. Okay. So when I was a kid, I was Camila Khalife con cara de café. Because café, coffee, rhymes with my last name, you know?
Okay.
And now it's funny because
you're in coffee.
I work in coffee, and when I introduce myself in Spanish, my last name rhymes with what I do. So it's hard to introduce myself and sound serious. So in English, it's easier to say that I am Camila Khalife and I work in coffee. So I do a little bit of everything. I have been working in coffee not so long, I would say, for around 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in communication, a lot of, like, the majority of my working life. I've been in the communications world.
Mm-hmm.
So I started in coffee kind of by coincidence, and I fell in love with the sensory side.
Mm-hmm.
It was my entrance.
Mm-hmm.
And I started copying, and I started learning about copying and fences and sensory analysis and quality analysis and quality control. So I have specialized in that. I am very passionate about education and knowledge sharing. So I started a business here in Ecuador. I had a coffee shop, but then that coffee shop started mutating into a coffee lab and then into a
As
training
it happens.
center. Yeah, because it's my business, so I can
Yeah.
do
Do what I
whatever I
want.
want. Exactly. So it's always mutating, it's always changing. And now I'm also very lucky to work with an organization that focuses on community-led development in the coffee sector. Because working in coffee quality, working in with producers or buying coffee, you see a lot of things. And like I think that during my years working in coffee, buying, coffee selling, doing quality control, I got to see a lot and to question a lot, or there were many things that were not necessarily making sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I looked for ways to learn more about what's going on, in all
Mm-hmm.
the side, because I feel we have like one side very clear, like all the information, all the speech we have comes from one side. So yeah,
I
I think
don't
I
know
noticed
what
that.
you mean. I don't know what you might be alluding to. I'm being sarcastic, folks, for those who aren't watching on the video.
I was like, I know. So yeah, exactly. So anyway, now I work with this organization called the Chain Collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically partner with leaders from coffee communities in Latin America, in Africa, and we support their projects they want to work on
Okay.
for their own community, with their own vision, with their own. We can talk more about it later, but I'm really glad that I also get to be involved with that side of coffee, not
Mm-hmm.
only the flavor and the. I have also been a judge in coffee competitions for a while.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of things that I love about it. The learning, I love the learning part. Um, I know, I know you have opinions,
I
and
have so
people
many
have
fucking
opinions.
opinions about
So many
about
fucking opinions.
competitions, but I'm not sure
About
that anybody wants them.
I'm sure people want them. I have opinions too, but in the different things I do, both in education, in competitions, in the different things that I've gotten involved, I think I've always found this single side, like controlling,
Mm-hmm.
the environment, and I feel it's important that people like me, or you, or people that come from different backgrounds
Mm-hmm.
get involved, because it's kind of easy to say, oh, it's like it's that side controlling the conversation, so
Right.
I'm not getting involved. I think it's better if we get involved and maybe
100%.
change things from within.
Well, and
You know?
if now's not the time to do that, there's never going to be a time to do that.
No, definitely.
Which leads me to what the theme of this series is going to be. And what we're going to explore in this series is where the privilege is in coffee. And look, I would encourage anybody who's like, oh, fuck, these two. Seriously, is this what you're going to talk about? If you rolled your eyes when you heard me say, where is the privilege in coffee? This series is for you. This is not for the people who understand where the privilege is in coffee. This series is for people who are thinking, what do we need to talk about this stuff for? People, we're in a coffee crisis. We are in a situation where roasters and green buyers can't afford to buy the coffee that's available to them. And that right there is going to the heart of the privilege that we're going to be talking about. There's a whole bunch of privilege steeped in the fact that you get to feel the things that you're feeling about the price of coffee right now. So this episode in particular, we're going to start asking that question. Where is the privilege in coffee? So Camila, where is the privilege in coffee from your perspective?
I think that, like, when I reflect about this, it's hard to give a simple answer. I don't think it's that simple. And the more you think about it, the more complicated it gets.
Yeah.
Because I think what we call privilege, I think anyone who's listening has this idea of privilege in mind. But it's also a very, from there, we are having a very white-centric, American-centric, and European-centric definition of what privilege is.
So and probably male-centric as well.
Probably what?
Male. And we are not going to be white bashing or male bashing or anything like that in this conversation. That's not the point.
No, but that is not the point at all. But I think it's worth acknowledging that when we talk about privilege, we talk about how close we are to that successful white male experience, you know? It's like, what do you consider privilege? Or when we have these conversations about privilege, we are talking about that notion of privilege. And that is not necessarily what every culture considers privilege. You know, it's like because I think about it and I'm like, okay, you can say, this particular white guy is very privileged because this and this and this. But then that person is lacking a lot of the things that I consider privileged or that I can consider my life to be privileged. And we can talk about anything, you know, the food, the weather, what I do with my time, the way my kids are educated. So I think it's important to acknowledge that when we think about privilege, we are not thinking about this, maybe the same, or that it doesn't mean the same for everyone. But I do think that we can agree that we are talking about advantages, or the advantages that a certain, the way we move in the system give us.
Okay.
So, right?
Right. So if I understand you
very
correctly,
privileged. You know, I can't say I am not privileged. Right. I don't want people to think, or that women are not privileged. We can find privilege.
Bro, I'm living my dream life in Dubai. I'm like the last person who gets to say I'm not privileged, right? So
right. Or people who live in the forest. They are very privileged for many reasons, you know, that we can think. But when we are discussing this particular privilege, we are discussing a privilege that's very tied to capitalism, with academia, with corporate success, you know. And in that system, that is the system that we live in at the moment.
Right. So how would you define privilege in this context?
I think we are talking about the advantages that you can have within the system that we are talking. So in that mindset, we can definitely say that a white man is more privileged, because by default in this system, they access to more opportunities, to to everything, basically, to more of everything, or the effort they have to make to access things is lower, right? So
Okay.
that's also a way I see privilege. The more privileged you are, the less you have to work for something,
To have your opportunities. This is fascinating. So if I'm going to enjoy this conversation so much. Well, because I think about this stuff a lot, and the one place I keep arriving at is it's complicated, right? It's complicated because I am in a privileged situation where I get to talk to people across the entire supply chain. Excuse me. And I get to talk to people who are doing very well across the supply chain, and I get to talk to people who are doing devastatingly bad across the supply chain. And I wish it was a particular kind of, I wish I could be able to say, excuse me, that let's say on the consuming end of the market, that white men don't fail or white women don't fail. But if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is not about failing or succeeding. It's about the opportunity that they get to take a shot.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's it's not about not failing, of course. And that is, I think, a lot of what I write about or talk about is exactly that, like noticing that white people can fail and white people have failed us in many occasions. And on the other side, it's the same. Producers, coffee producers, people coming from producing communities can fail too and can succeed as well.
Right.
But it's not just assuming that. I think we are like all the time in the coffee industry because it's so tied to social justice, and to economic development. And so we are talking about people all the time, and we are we can't separate coffee, the product, coffee, the cup, people.
Right.
I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think there are these complex conversations with other agricultural products that are largely consumed. I don't know if there are
people in
podcasts
broccoli
about
are not doing this.
corn. Exactly. So it's not
right. Right. It's not like broccoli. No.
What makes it different?
I think that colonialism is a big part of what makes it different. I think that the fact that there is this commodity that is enjoyed by so many people while still having a disconnect from where the commodity that they're enjoying came from, and a lack of people even caring. And I think what's happening is that consumers defer that responsibility to the people who they're buying the product from. So the consumer looks for what's on the bag, and they see either a fair trade label, or they see an organic label, or any of those kinds of things, responsibly sourced, whatever. And they think, okay, Nestle's telling me that this coffee was sourced fairly. That alleviates me from any having to worry about anything.
I think it's I think you're right, but I think it's the other way around too. It's the specialty coffee industry has the power. I don't think it's necessarily the consumer giving the power. It's the industry grabbed the power. Grabbed the power to tell the story. It's not, I don't think the consumers necessarily make decisions based on what they like, what they enjoy, and then they go and they demand it's like the industry puts products out there and then they make their choices. If we go back to the beginning of specialty coffee, what is specialty?
Mm-hmm.
Or what we were defining for so many years as specialty coffee, it was coffee that tasted better, you know?
Right.
We invented this system, this 100-point scale that differentiated the commercial grade coffee from specialty grade, right? I don't know how, or I feel that has created, it solved some issues. It created, I don't know if many more, but many issues too. I feel we created a problem that now we don't know how to solve. So in the process of separating this coffee that tasted better or that was that deserved to be paid better, right? Because we tied flavor to price. If you think about it, it sounds like a good thing. Okay, we are people saying that we are going to reward producers if they produce coffee that tastes better. Who made the decision on what was better? Who made the decision of what was high quality? It was the industry, right? It was not consumers. It was not the end consumer. It was people in the industry.
Except the end consumer validates and invalidates those decisions with their buying power, right? But I take your point.
And that happens in every industry.
Right.
Every consumer will make the decision to buy or not to buy, to pay more, to pay less. But in what industry there's someone in the middle deciding everything? It's this gap, this group of people, this part of the chain saying, I am going to pay this much per coffee, and I'm going to sell for this much. Why don't we continue the logic if it's such a good logic for buyers to decide the price, right? I'm copying, I'm making my notes, I'm okay, and I'm saying I'm going to pay this much for coffee because it's an 85 or an 87 or an 87 or whatever. Then why does it end there? Why don't they put the cup of coffee in their coffee shop and say, okay, now you decide how much you are going to pay for this? The consumer is not making that choice, you know? It's like, it's so crazy that there's someone deciding how much to pay for it's crazy.
I need you to help me understand why it's crazy. Because for me, this is how we're becoming part of a system that exists, right? The capitalistic system exists. That's what coffee producers have decided to grow coffee. And without somewhere to sell it, if they grow it and don't have somebody to sell it to, then they have to go grow broccoli or something, right? They'll which is the same system as well, because the supermarkets are doing the same thing.
But the supermarkets are deciding on their selling price, same as coffee shops, same as roasters.
Right.
Coffee producers are not deciding on their selling price.
So you're talking about the C market is what you're talking about is the issue here.
The specialty, not even the C. In specialty coffee, when you created this system of rewarding quality,
right?
It was not, okay, producers, cup your coffee and tell us what's the quality of it and tell us how much it costs to produce and tell us how much you need us to pay for it. It was not like that. It was like, we are going to cup the coffee and we are going to tell you how much we are willing to pay for it. No matter anything else. We put so much emphasis on flavor, on cup quality, right? And now we are trying to untangle all that, saying that there are other things that matter. Of course, there are other things that matter, but those were always there. It's not new, like environmental issues, like people
100%.
always.
I see what you're saying.
So they were always there. And So going back, maybe you're thinking, what does this have to do with privilege? Privilege in coffee is exactly that. Being the one who decides how much to pay, who decides if it's good or bad, if it's valuable or not valuable, if it's, I don't know, privileged is the one who tells the story, who controls the narrative. And that is not in the producing side.
So this is where I think we are entering a transitionary point. I have a couple of clients who are coffee producers. I don't charge them, but they're clients. I treat them the same way I treat every other client. And they say this thing to me. Their big thing is that they are not deciding the price that their coffee is going to be sold for. So I can talk in
crazy.
Well, hold on. So I'm a business coach, right? Like I'm a business advisor, but more than that, I'm a business coach. So I sit there and unpack the layers of a business and why the business has put itself together that way. And I do that across the supply chain. And so what I'm about to tell you is stuff that happens in real life in my work. So when a producer says this thing to me, my first thing is we have to look in the mirror. And we have to say, what role am I playing in enabling this fuckery? And that's usually a hard pill to swallow for a producer, right? It's also a hard pill to swallow for a cafe owner that says the same thing to me, though. When a cafe owner says to me, my customers won't pay the same amount, the amount that I need, I'm like, okay, what role are you playing in enabling this dysfunction? Because at the end of the day, if you're not doing what's necessary to have your own boundaries, people are going to manipulate them.
Yes.
Let me finish though. Let me finish.
I thought you had. Sorry.
So there's always a pushback, right? And the pushback usually is, but Lee, I'm in a desperate situation. I have to sell my coffee. And all of these kinds of things, right? So that's when we come back and say, okay, so let's give ourselves a time horizon where we're going to remove the desperation so that we no longer have this sitting over us. So in the short term, we know and we understand what's constantly got us in the chasing our tails. And essentially what I'm saying is we are going to lean into creating our own privilege. And that's the conversation that I have with producers and with cafe owners and with roasters. It's this idea that because since the pandemic and since living in America with the Black Lives Matter movement happening around me while it was going on, right? It was terrifying. And I'm like, okay, let's take a look at what's really going on here because it's happening in my industry. And the more I think about it, the more I think that this is a person situation, because I know that there is a lot of white people that don't have anywhere close to the privilege that this idea of white privilege comes from, right? So if we're going to look at this, essentially this is an issue about boundaries. This is an issue about being in a situation where you don't know how, and you're not in a place to be able to say no to somebody that's taking advantage of you. And
that's exactly what I was going to add.
Right. Okay. So then what it is, and this is why what I do is coaching rather than just business advisory. It's about, okay, let's remove the stigma of what's happened in the past. Let's understand why we're allowing it to constantly happen. And the fact that we allow it to happen is something that we have to own. And it may not be us that put us in that situation. It may be our environment. It may be our generational trauma. It may be the government. It may be corruption that's around us, etc., etc. But from the moment you start looking at, I am in this situation. I either stay in this situation or I work my fucking ass off to try and find a way out of it. And there are ways to do that, but I was in a situation like that and it nearly killed me from how hard I had to work to get out of it. And I say all of this to say that this is so fucking complicated. And when you were the one that presented something to me for the first time, and we are going to talk about it in the next episode, where you said to me, this idea of empowering producers is ridiculous. Mm. And it got me thinking after you said it to me, that when I have a conversation with the producers that I work with, this is not about saying to them, you need to take the power back, you need to, and I have been guilty on this podcast of saying, we need to redistribute the power back across the supply chain, blah, 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 blah. And you really got me thinking about it when you said it to me. When I have conversations with my producers, again, it's not just producers, it's with business owners across the supply chain. This is about us saying, if we continue to have the conversation about the privileges that I don't have, we're going to get stuck in that cycle. If I accept the preface that I come from a lack of privilege, that's fine. But the choice to stay there, I can hear everybody screaming at their fucking earphones right now. The choice to stay there is a choice to say, I'm not going to reach out for help. I'm not going to find people that I'm going to say, I need you to consult to me for free. I'm not going to go and say this. I need to go and find somebody and say, I don't know how to find customers. Can you teach me how to find customers? Go ahead, go, jump. I love this conversation.
I see what you're saying. The thing is, there needs to be a support system for what you are saying. I think it's easy to set boundaries, or in order to set boundaries, you need to be in a position of power. As this power, have power
internally,
on yourself.
within yourself.
I feel you made me think of, or I don't know if you made the analogy of an abusive relationship.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. It is a dysfunctional relationship.
But it's kind of, I don't know if there's this word in English. In Spanish, it's revictimizar, like re-victimize the victim.
Right.
Putting the weight on the victim. Putting the weight of liberation, of getting out of that situation on the victim. When there is no support system, when there is nothing else to tell the bully here, hey, stop. It's not easy to get out of abusive relationships. It takes a lot of courage. It takes, so producers or people in these unbalanced relationships, right? Mm-hmm. Unbalanced business relationships. How can you say no or set boundaries when you are in a desperate situation, right? So I think it takes more than their willingness to do so, because it's like, okay, I say no to this sale and I am fucked and my whole family is fucked. So it's not only on them. It's like, why are we enabling the system? Everyone,
Okay.
So it's, and maybe here we can talk about not all producers are in the same situation. Right. And not all producers can afford to say, no, I'm not selling my coffee to you, or I am not selling my coffee for this much. There are a few producers that can do it, large farms, rich farmers, privileged in that sense. But if you are in a fucked up situation, it is almost impossible to say no. Like, how many of us have stayed at horrible
relationships for too long, and jobs, all of it.
Relationships, for too long, and not because we wanted to, or not because we didn't care.
We've all done it, and I did it too many times, in jobs and in relationships, which is why I went and got so much training about this stuff, right? How to help people in business, etc., etc. But I want to pick up on something that you said before we end this episode. We end up in a trap if we go and help someone who hasn't asked for our help, because now people are being white saviors. We're fucked if we do, and we're fucked if we don't. So this sets us up perfectly for the next episode. Perfectly. I can see you itching to answer, but this episode has already gone far too long. We knew this was going to happen. Join us for the next episode, folks. We're going to be talking about whether producers need empowering. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward.